when you've been living under the unsettling manipulation tactics of a narcissist for any extended period of time, you'll know how difficult it is to feel like you know what reality is anymore. There was a time when I fully didn't grasp this stuff at all, and I can hardly say I have a full handle on it now, but I really know so much more than I did when I was first even introduced to the term. I remember at one point feeling like, because I didn't have the terms and the framework in which to place it, I remember my instinct was, I feel like I've had Stockholm syndrome. And this was still in the middle of the relationship after a particularly difficult time. And I really think that's a useful way of thinking about it as well. Stockholm syndrome. You don't know what's real. You don't know who you are. You don't know where your loyalties lie. And you only really know what the narcissist wanted you to perceive about things. And yes, while you have inklings of what may be true, every time you've tried to act on them or express them, you've been subdued or punished in subtle and not so subtle ways. You lose your anchors, you lose context because of the stress and strain of everything that occurs so often. Your brain changes the way it responds to things. You become entrained to the very person that is hurting you, and you become unable to separate their imposed reality upon you from the one that you would consider to be true and real, and that you are desperately struggling to try and grasp. And I really feel like you make your way towards your own reality in stages, ongoing stages, in order to even be able to separate yourself from the narcissist. I feel like a number of those stages occur while you're still with them. And once you can get enough distance in terms of perspective, sometimes it's about spending a little more time away from them so they can't keep reinforcing their perception of reality onto you. Whatever it is, it's that eventually enables you to make the physical distance. And even then, you still will not have a hold on the reality. It's my thought that it's very unlikely to ever get 100% hold on it, ultimately. So much is hidden from you, both intentionally, but also unintentionally, subconsciously, by these manipulators. For many of them, at least some of what they're doing is unaware to they themselves. But yes, you do get some distance eventually. And as you try and adjust to your life now, more layers start to come off. More things pop out at you from your past with this person. And you start to see them in a new light, in a new context. And you start to realize, oh no, what I took for XYZ actually had a completely different meaning. That's why it was so confusing. You kind of go back and rewrite history, not intentionally. It's almost like your mind has this whole backlog. And now when you're given a new vantage point, a new perspective, your brain goes through, when it has some spare processing power, it goes through and it brings up things up to the surface and goes, look at this, how about this? And then you take your new perspective and you look at that thing in relation, and it gains new meaning and you have clarity, and another layer comes off. And you learn about the narcissist. You learn about the way they work. You learn about how you were able to become vulnerable to them. You learn where you could protect yourself better next time. You learn where there was nothing you really should have done different. No one told you. And so it goes, a process, a self-discovery, and a reacquaintance with your real. Because for the longest time, they would have utilized your stability, your strength, your energy to create the structure of their reality in which they wanted you to live. You would have been made to feel less than, to feel weak, to keep you within that world, dependent and reliant upon them. But it was your stability that made things foundational, that built the scaffolding and the structure that enabled them to live out their dreams of who they wish they could be. Because left to their own devices, they are chaotic systems that fall into collapse. And this is why they rely on us. And I suppose their ego is too great to let them respect the very people that are propping them up. With our life and our love. But when all of that burden is taken from you, you realize how much capacity you had, that you were sharing with love freely. Because this is why you came. This is why you entered the relationship. You expected a free and fair exchange. You expected to be held up, lifted when you needed it, and when they needed it, you would lift them. You expected a good faith agreement, but you didn't understand then that that wasn't what they were bringing to the table. But now, as the layers come off, as you've stepped away, as you start to get a bit stronger. Because at first, it's all grief. It's all coming out of a daze. It's all confusion and self-recrimination and feeling like, how did I let this happen? And what even happened? And how come I was never told about people like this who systematically entrap? While smiling at you and making you think that they're there to be your best support. But after you get through that, it just requires a bit of space, a bit of time, and lots of self-love. Lots of being merciful to yourself. The way you're compassionate and merciful to other people, all of that, you direct that to yourself because you need it. You need it now. And then you feel that emptiness, you feel that space. Where the reality they constructed used to be, and now there's nothing. At first, that emptiness feels very difficult, feels very hollow. But my experience is that it soon changes from hollowness to just space. From negative, empty, to neutral space. I feel like when it gets to that point, that's where we have potential to begin. Anything prior to that almost feels like a panicked, knee-jerk reaction, which doesn't feel like the right way to go. It feels like rebound energy. It feels like, oh, I just need to do something so I can feel like I haven't been hollowed out. You know, I'll go to this place and I'll meet these people. There's a chaotic energy about that. And I would urge that may be best to reconsider. And instead of following that kind of compulsion born of grief and despair, to try and sit through the difficulty. Not for 1 second am I going to pretend it isn't excruciating. But I think that solitude at that time is best. Solitude and or only the most trusted, if you have any most trusted family or friend. For myself, nature. People with pets or animals. These are healing factors. These are grounding factors. Music, like sound therapy. If you play an instrument, once you get yourself past that point and into the neutral space, it does feel better. It still doesn't feel great though, because that's the point where you feel like you just don't want anything. You don't know what you want. Nothing feels inviting. Nothing feels like it used to. Nothing feels like it fills you with excitement or desire or anticipation. And when you think about the vast empty space ahead of you, it feels like too much. You can't even think of one thing you want. How are you going to fill this grand tapestry that could be painted when you can't even decide on one color to start with? What I found worked for me was to give myself the gift of a mini future, a mini interim bridge future. I realized that I just couldn't map out the future the way I used to. Too many things had been lost. There was too much uncertainty. Too many people were gone from my life. All of the things that used to anchor the choices that I might normally make. The slate had kind of been wiped clean, not entirely, but sufficiently, so that a normal writing of the future that used to feel natural, it just wasn't within my grasp. So it seemed to be a matter of, you can't get there from there. I needed to build a space between, a bridge. So I sort of pulled back on placing too much importance on what that grand future was going to look like. And I decided, okay, I will make a mini future, an interim future. And because I can't think of anything in particular that's important to me, and I don't really want anything in particular, and I don't really care as long as I don't have to deal with the BS that I've been dealing with recently, then relax the parameters around what the mini future could look like. And for me, the time frame I put on it was 6 months. It turned out that I didn't need that, but just thinking about it in those terms helped. I remember I was going to a fair because I forced myself to get out and try and do some things that I did still like. So there's a kind of fair, a very niche kind of fair that happens here once a month. So I decided I was going to take the time to go, force myself to go to something that I would like. And while I was there, it happened to be close to Halloween, and people were dressing up. They don't usually dress up for this fair because it's a monthly thing, but this year at Halloween, the organizers had said, if you attend the fair, dress up if you feel like it. So I was seeing all these people dressed up, and I remember thinking, you know, I can sort of tell what kind of like group they're in. They seem to be in sort of like a LARPing group, and some people were like dressed up more of like medieval or like pixie core, quasi folk or cottage core. And I was like, okay, I get these kind of people. I kind of understand that group that they're in. I'm not really interested in it, but I could be, you know? I could be interested in things like that. Not long term, just for 6 months. And I never actually eventually got involved, but it loosened up something in my mind. It was like what I decide to do to get me to the next stage of my life, what I decide to do over the next 6 months doesn't have to have more of a purpose than helping me to discern what I want and what I don't want, and help me create even more distance and even more space between the dysfunctional space and time that I just left and the one that I'm going towards. It helped me realize that I wasn't just going to jump straight into fully functional future forecasting. Ooh, that's an alliteration. It was unreasonable to expect that of myself. So could I just allow myself 6 months of, yeah, maybe. Just thinking about the cottagecore and the LARPing group helped me to realize, yeah, I could, but I don't really want to. Once I made that mental switch of I don't need to plan my future, I can plan or allow myself an interim future that only lasts about 6 months. And if I just put no pressure on myself and just weave and wander my way through that, it'll get me more back in touch with myself, more grounded in the now of what I want and don't want, that I will be better prepared to plan into the future from there. As it happened, once I started doing that, just in my mind really, I started to actually be able to prepare for my actual future much quicker. It didn't take 6 months. So I think a lot of it was just the pressure and the burden that I was placing on myself. Probably in part because of self-recrimination. Like, oh wow, I've spent all of this energy and time and investment into something that is not going to give me a future. It's just taken from me. So I felt an urgency to quickly, come on, let's do this. You're behind the 8 ball. You gotta get a future and you gotta make it happen. That was one of the bigger things. So give yourself some space. Don't make anything too concrete too quickly. Realize that you've probably been so separated from a grounded experience of who you are, what you want moving forward, that it'd be quite difficult for you to immediately know what you want for your future with, and for you to be able to apply yourself with the right amount of energy and the right frequency and the right mindset. So give yourself time. Even now, even though it didn't take 6 months, I still feel like if I want, let me be more loose with my options. If I want to take a class, I can take one class and never do it again. Or I can take a class and this might be my new thing. If we can reframe it a self-discovery without pressure, self-discovery without any need to know the future right now, without any need to be absolutely sure of what the outcome is going to be. A year from now, 2 years from now, if we just let ourselves be and rediscover ourselves from a calm and loving space without judgment, we're getting closer to where we want to be. I hope this video helped you, maybe gave you some insight. If you're going through some similar things, maybe gave you some food for thought. If you enjoyed the message, maybe leave a comment down below, or maybe like, share, and subscribe.